Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Kristin Kurtz, and I'm also the founder of New Wings Coaching. I help and empower wild-hearted and adventurous women of faith feeling caged and stuck unlock their true purpose and potential, break free from limitations, and thrive with confidence, courage, and hope. If you're curious to learn more about coaching with me, head to newwingscoaching.net and be sure to explore the show notes for ways to connect with me further. Get ready to dive in as we uncover empowering keys and insights in this episode. So tune in and let's unlock hope together. Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm Kristin Kurtz, your host. I pray this episode is like a holy ivy of hope for your soul. Please help me welcome Calvin Bagley to the show. Very excited to have him on today. New connection, and I just know that he's going to bring a powerful testimony to reach the listeners. So, Calvin, before we get started with what you're being led to share today, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to, Kristin. Thank you so much for having me here for this conversation. I've enjoyed getting to know you prior to the start of our recording here, and I'm looking forward to it. My name is Calvin Bagley. I live in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. You know, we're going to be talking a lot about faith, I'm sure, today. And so people may not think that there's a lot of faith in Las Vegas, but I'll tell you that there's a great Christian community actually here. And I feel like it's been a great place to raise my family. I have my wife and my two children. My son is 13. My daughter is 8 years old. Okay. And in business, I'm an entrepreneur. I have started several companies and found success in financial services and insurance, specifically helping people with Medicare insurance has been one of my main things, help people all over the country with their Medicare. And, personally, though, I've overcome challenges that a lot of people would not know or suspect. I was raised in a kind of a fundamentalist Mormon family, and where faith was twisted in some awkward ways. I was shielded from the world and was unable to attend school. I was homeschooled all the way until I was 18 years old. And I say homeschooled, but I wasn't really taught anything. So I call it no-schooled. Yeah. And when I turned 50 this past summer, I felt like it was time to kind of bare my soul and share my what I've overcome with the world. And I wrote a memoir about my life, and it's called Hiding from the School Bus. And I think we'll talk a lot about that today.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing just part of what you've walked through in a very short snippet. I know that you're going to share more. I would love to hear, there might be somebody who's listening that maybe doesn't know what fundamentalist Mormon means. Maybe if you could just start there, they might be questioning. I'm always kind of listening for what might be somebody asking.
Yeah, that's good. Fundamentalist Mormon, I think most people would assume that means polygamous. My parents were not polygamous, but they had they shared a lot of fundamentalist beliefs with people who practice polygamy. And by the way, I should say that polygamy is not practiced by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it was, 150 years ago or 200, whenever that was. And then there were some that didn't want to let the practice go. And so you'll find these groups of people living in isolation, practicing odd things like polygamy. And my parents were friends with a lot of those people. They didn't themselves practice polygamy, and my parents actually attended regular Mormon, church, which in the mainstream. But I'd say the hallmark of fundamentalism is that you don't think anyone else is doing it enough, or they're not doing it right, or they're not going far enough. And that's kind of where my parents would take things to the extreme. And so when I say fundamentalist, I mean that they were taking their faith or religion into to extremes.
Okay. So would that be, I hear, people talk about works, kind of like this works mentality. Is that kind of parallel a little bit where there's never enough that you can do? Like you have to keep working, do this, do that to be basically accepted.
Yeah, it is in line with that and taking it, more and more to the edge. And so in the theology of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there is, for example, something called the word of wisdom, which is that we should take care of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
and that includes some laws or requirements to, for people who want to go to the temple, for example, in that religion,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way, I practice the mainstream religion today. But for people who want to go to the temple, for example, they have to obey the law of health, which is to not drink alcohol or
Mm-hmm.
smoke or etc. So drink
Mm-hmm.
coffee is one of the things that people know a lot about the church. And so my parents never didn't feel like that was enough, and so they would take it further. We didn't eat meat. We didn't eat chocolate, for example, because they
Wow.
believed it was unhealthy. And there were all these additional lists of things that we didn't do.
Mm.
Another example is that my parents didn't allow us to wear shorts. They didn't feel like
Mm.
that was they thought that was exposing too much of your body, and even for
Mm.
us boys. And so
Mhm.
I had to wear pants and jeans, and my sisters wore long, like kind of what you'd expect from maybe a polygamous colony, these long
Sure.
dresses that go all the way to the ground and things like that. And
Oh.
so those are not beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or the Mormons, but my
Mhm.
parents were it wasn't enough for them. They needed to take it further and further. And the
Oh.
ultimate capstone of this was that they didn't think that we could be educated properly by going to school because they were feared the influences
Mhm.
that they deemed to be Satan or evil or whatever that would happen at
Mm.
school, and so they kept us from going to school.
Wow. Wow. And how many siblings did you have? Or do you have, I should say?
I am the seventh of nine siblings.
Okay. Okay. So how many girls were in your family?
There were five girls and
Mhm.
four boys.
Okay. So you're one of the younger ones. How, I guess, like have most of your siblings kind of continued on this journey, or have they like changed their ways, you know? I know
That's a
I have a feeling you'll tell us more about, your exit per se,
yes.
but how did that look for your siblings? Was it, kind of like let's move on for everybody, or just you? What did that look like?
That's a great question because it's very telling. And I think that people listening might predict this, but most of my siblings rebelled in very
Mm,
serious ways and
okay.
found themselves in difficult and challenging situations. And many
Mm,
of them to this day struggle with very serious problems.
okay. Okay. Well, tell us more about, most of the time when our children turn 18, they're kind of like in the world system, they'd be like you're legal to kind of go on your own. What did that look like for you once you got to that point? Not sure what it looked like when you're being unschooled or no schooled.
Yeah, no schooled.
But what did that transition look like for you? Did you go off to college? Tell us more about that time.
Yeah, I'd love to. When I turned 18, my brother he had run away from home when he was just, I think he was still 16. I think my
Oh
brother
gosh.
just older than me,
Okay.
and he was just about to turn 17. He ran away from home with his girlfriend, and eventually ended up in Las Vegas, which I live in Las Vegas to this day. And
Yeah.
I came to visit him when I turned 18, and he said, Calvin, you can do anything you want. You don't have to be trapped there.
Oh.
And when I did decide to return to my parents' home. I think when I
Hmm.
came to visit him, actually, I would take that back. I think I was 17.
Okay.
And I returned home and I basically said to my parents, I'm going to do things my way. And if you don't like it, I'll run away to my brother's place in Las Vegas. And
Wow.
they
That
had
was
seen their
bold.
kids, yeah, they'd seen their kids run away enough and had seen enough rebellion that they sort of had been weakened
Mm.
a bit to that point and allowed me to kind of do things my way and be my own self. But
Okay.
before that point came, there were I I'm going to oversimplify some of
Yeah.
the challenges of my youth, but my parents had this knack for inviting people into our home
Hmm.
that were not good to be there, and so we would have people come in and out of our home There ended up being, abuse of every kind that you can imagine that occurred in our home. And we were just totally
Yeah.
isolated from the world. And it was just a terrible environment
Hmm.
where, the lack of schooling
Yeah.
was the least of the problems at the time, but became
Hmm.
the mountain that I had to overcome later.
Yeah. Wow. So were you allowed to have friends? Were you able to like talk to anybody outside of your family, really? I mean, in church, what did that look like?
The one the one thing we had was church. On Sundays, we would go to church and I would interact with a few a few people my age.
Hmm.
And this was at the time, I was born in 1975. And so,
Hmm.
Star Wars and all these things were happening in the late 70s and early 80s. And we were just
Yeah.
outside observers of this popular culture that was happening.
Hmm.
Music and everything was all prohibited in our home.
Wow. All
And,
music?
uh, well, my parents would allow classical music, and we were all my parents both were musicians. My mother sang and played a little piano, and my father played the fiddle. And so we were trained in music. I was taught music, mostly piano, by my older sister. And by the way, up to this day, I play organ at my congregation, and
Oh,
so
you do?
I've accomplished in playing piano and organ. And that
Yeah.
started as a very young age, and it's something that I love.
Hmm.
And music was a retreat and a mental retreat and escape for me all
Mm.
throughout my youth. And so we had good music. We didn't have
Okay.
any popular music, which
Sure.
I also think is good music.
Yes. Right? So
And
you
so
weren't able to listen to music or, be part of like the popular culture, quote unquote,
but we
when
would
you
be
would,
exposed to it by people at
yeah,
church for those few hours.
right.
And then we would come back to our world. So I knew that there was a world outside, and my older siblings were all going through different
Hmm.
types of rebellions and things and breaking free and what have you. And
Hmm.
so I
Wow.
write about in my book, actually, one time
Mhm.
we were out on the side of the road. We lived in the country. We didn't have neighbors. Our nearest, we were on a farm, and so
Okay.
we'd have to go a mile or two to find the nearest
Oh, wow.
farm nearby. And so we would go out and hike on the highway and collect aluminum cans, and
Hmm.
then we would drive into, we when we were young, we say go to town. We'd go to
Hmm.
town
Yeah.
and cash in on those aluminum cans and come up with, $15-20 or something. And that was how we would make money. And
Yeah.
one time we were out collecting cans, and we weren't allowed to do this in the daytime, or during school hours. Our parents always wanted us to stay indoors during school hours because they didn't want the school bus to come by. That's why we literally hid from the school bus. When the school bus came by, we had to hide because if it saw us, our parents were feared that it would be reported that we were not
Oh,
going to school.
okay. And
Um,
what state was this?
this was in the state of Utah, the
Okay.
border of Colorado and Wyoming.
Okay. So they could have technically been reported.
They could have been reported, yes.
Oh, okay. So you're hiding from the school bus.
And we find on the side of the road this cassette tape that someone
Yeah.
had it had probably been eaten by their stereo in their car, and they pulled it
Yes.
out and they threw it out their window, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
you see this bush with all of you remember cassette tape. There's the
Oh,
tape is
yeah.
like
Oh,
glittering
yeah.
on the bush and flying in
Yeah.
the wind, and we
Yes. Well, you might have to
meticulously.
pause for a second. We might have to
Yes,
pause for
go.
a moment. For those who are, 20 years old listening to this podcast right now, Calvin, could you tell them what a cassette tape is?
Well, you know, cassette tapes predate discs, which predate iPods, which predate
Mhm.
iPhones. Although I felt like
Yeah.
they were in the wrong order. Don't you feel like cassette tapes were pretty advanced? Actually,
I think they're
I
pretty
thought they were.
cool.
I thought they were
I
cool.
always wondered how stuff got on that tape.
Yeah, and you could
I
record
just
over them and stuff.
wondered.
They didn't skip
But
like a disc
yeah, I mean,
CD.
it was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, inside of them there was the tape, and it was all wound up inside, and your tape player
Hmm.
would slowly wind, through
Hmm.
the tape to play your music.
Hmm.
And yeah, this tape is,
Yeah.
this black and brown tape is all over this bush, and we meticulously collected it and
Oh,
brought
you
it home
did.
in a ball, and we
Like a
laid it
treasure.
out like a treasure. Yes,
Yeah.
as I'm telling you this, if you could see my hands, I'm like
I can
laying them out
totally
on the
see.
table, and I'm
Yep.
like caressing this treasure we
Hmm.
found, and
Yeah.
we carefully put it back together, splice it in a couple spots where with a
Hmm.
cassette tape you would have to use like Scotch tape to put it together and tape it,
Yeah. And did
and
you use a
as your music
pencil too
we
to
used a
twist it?
pencil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we used the pencil and twisted the tape back in. And whenever it would go over the Scotch tape, it would skip, or not skip, but you'd have like
Like
a
a,
loud sound. Yep.
yeah.
And then the music would keep playing. And we
Hmm.
treasured that cassette tape
Wow.
because it had
Wow.
music. And you know what it was? You'll never believe this. It's like
Um, what year was it, roughly?
this would be like 1983.
Hmm. ZZ Top? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that would have been good. That would have been good. I've gone back and listened to all the music that I missed as a kid, and
Yeah.
but no, it wasn't ZZ Top. It was more. I mean, think of a like God's hand in this in a way. And my
Okay.
parents would, like, my dad would roll over in his grave right now, hearing me say that. My mom, she's 86, but it
Okay.
was Footloose.
It was Footloose. Oh my
It was
gosh.
Footloose.
I was
The
listening to a song
music.
from that album this morning.
What were you listening to?
It's that ah, what's that song? I don't want to sing it.
Yeah, you don't have to.
You
It's
guys don't
okay.
want to hear me sing it. But I go to a step class on Tuesdays and he plays this song all the time and I cannot remember the name of it and I don't want to sing it. So, anyways, you keep going with your story.
That's great.
Footloose, and you have not, at that point you probably obviously hadn't seen the movie.
No, no, absolutely not.
Hmm.
Um, but my brothers, who, they had my two brothers older than me, and they had older friends, and they knew a little bit about what the movie was, and
Hmm.
and could explain, but they hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
But it's the story of this young man moving to a town that's overtly religious, where they don't allow dancing and things like that, and he just wants to dance. He just wants to be free.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, as I've grown older and thought more about how unbelievable it is, it's like a little bit of God's touch, in there. And you wouldn't expect God to deliver a Footloose, or even
Hmm.
anyone to say that God was delivering you a Footloose cassette tape in your
Yes.
childhood, but He did
Yes.
for me. And
Mm.
for me, it was like, there some people are taking this too seriously. Some people are not taking it seriously enough, and some
Hmm.
people are taking it too seriously. And God, men are that they might have joy.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's an early blessing from God that
Hmm.
eventually leads to me rebuilding my faith around love instead of fear.
Yes. Well, and if I'm just even pulling up the songs from this, some of like Holding Out for a Hero,
Oh, I
right?
love that song. Oh,
Like you
sing
were
it at the top of my
literally,
lungs.
it's like there's so many places I could go with that, but just even that song, like how does that like relate to even just that part of your story? Like were you wanting to escape at that point and just had no idea how?
You just made me cry. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit
No.
emotional.
I'm s- I do
That's
that
what I
sometimes. I'm
I
sorry,
needed a
but it's
hero like you
good.
wouldn't believe at that
Exactly.
time in my
Like a
life.
rescue, right?
I needed a rescue.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
listen to that song after this because I love that song. But
And
oh
even
man,
another song on there is I'm Free.
yeah, I love
I mean,
that
it's
one
so
too.
prophetic, like what he delivered that day to you. And you said you were 17? Ever hear something on this show that stirs something deep, like a nudge from God that there's more? That's stirring. It's not random. I'm Kristin Kurtz, host of Hope Unlocked and the founder of New Wings Coaching, and I'm inviting you into a 45-minute unlocking session, a sacred space to press in, hear what heaven is saying, and activate your next bold step. If you're a trailblazer or kingdom voice ready to break free from doubt and live fully alive, this is for you. Book now at newwingscoaching.net/hopeunlocked for special listener pricing. You were born to live uncaged and unapologetically bold. Now back to the show.
Oh no, I was like 8, 9. I was young.
Oh, you were
Maybe not.
that young?
Maybe I was 10. I can't do that.
Okay. I suppose
I was
going
very
back
young.
to 83, that would make sense. You'd be
Yeah,
about eight. Eight.
about
Oh,
8.
wow. 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 Yeah. And just,
Yeah.
there's times in our life and you can look back at these moments and, I've got my own story too, listening to different music. I was on the other spectrum of being able to listen to whatever, watch whatever. And that's a whole other story. But, going back to hearing some of these songs from your childhood, it literally can like break open and bring healing to those spots that you can, remember at that time. And viscerally for me, maybe what's happening for you, right?
Yeah.
It like
Yes.
viscerally like affects you. And
You
God's
know,
like, I want to touch that place of your heart
uh,
today and right now.
it really did touch me. And right now, and you're right, music and smells and some of these other things will take you right back there. But
Mm-hmm.
this is more than being taken back. It's this realization that even I hadn't really had before this moment of how much God's hand was in something as simple as a cassette tape fluttering in the wind on a bush, like it
Yeah.
really, there was
Yeah.
meaning in that music. And I belted
Yes.
those songs at the top of my lungs when
Yes.
I was,
Yes.
when the parents weren't around.
Right. Of course. Of course. Wow. So, and how many siblings were involved in the treasure
Just my
moment?
brother. So it was 4 girls,
Hmm.
and the 4 girls all were kind of leaving the home when I was very, very young. And
Oh,
then
okay.
it was the 4 boys and then one little girl at the end. And so
Okay.
most of my, memories of that, except my early young memories are with involve my sisters, but then all of
Okay.
my, preteen and early teen years, it was my brothers until they moved out. But
Mhm. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
but I'm very
What a
grateful for my
journey.
sisters because
Yeah.
my sister, my sister Kate, which was the 4th sister, she
Hmm.
passed away um, a year and a half ago on
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
sorry.
And
Oh,
thank you. And she was an angel, and
geez.
she's one of the ones of my, let me tell you a couple of things jumping ahead a little bit. But
Hmm.
my the reason that I feel like my story is impactful for many people is that
Hmm.
I went through some real challenges that include religious trauma, but I didn't throw out my faith.
Say
And
that
there is
again.
another.
Say that
I went
again.
I
Like
went
that
through.
somebody needs to hear that again.
Okay, I experienced religious trauma as a child,
Hmm.
but I didn't throw out my faith.
Mm.
I,
What does
I,
that
I,
mean to you?
to me, it means that my siblings, most of them, they pushed aside my parents,
Hmm.
rightfully so. And
Hmm.
with that, they pushed aside their faith in God.
Hmm.
And most of their, most of their religious beliefs and practices or anything, they just pushed it all. They threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to do. And I don't fault people who do that. When you experience trauma,
Yeah.
and you are running the other way, and I have run
Hmm.
very long and very far.
Yeah.
You want, sometimes all of those things can be triggering. And even my
Hmm.
wife to this day, we'll gather together and she'll say, you know, let's have family prayer, or let's read scripture or something like that. And
Hmm.
some of those words I will hear
Hmm.
an echo of my past, of my father
Yeah.
or my mother, and
Hmm.
it can be triggering to me. And but um I would have been able to separate my parents from God and my parents from faith,
Hmm. Hmm.
and hold to faith. And
Yes.
I don't fault my siblings for not doing that, but most of them couldn't do that. Most of them had to let their faith go when they let their parents go.
Mm. Wow. I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking of a question here. Your parents, like, was this kind of a generational pattern in essence?
Um, Not
Like
really.
they were
No,
raised this way or not really?
I, no, they weren't.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
both of them. My mom was like, she went to, high school in Idaho Falls, Idaho. She was a beauty queen.
Oh.
She was sang. She played. the lead role in The King and I, and in
Wow.
other, and in My Fair Lady. She was so proud. She had a beautiful singing voice.
Okay.
She was Miss Idaho Falls. She competed for Miss. She was runner up to Miss Idaho when she was 19
Wow.
years old. Beauty pad, beauty queen.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents were wonderful. They lived in Salt Lake City. My grandparents actually, my grandfather on my dad's side, when my
Mm-hmm.
dad was going out to manage this ranch for the Ute Native American tribe in Utah, my grandpa actually, it's documented that he begged him not to go and said it's not good for you to be away from family. And so I think my grandfather could see some of the cracks, I would say, that existed in my father,
Mm-hmm.
and tried to keep him from. He said it wouldn't be good for you to be that far away from the family, and I think he was right. And that's the point actually when my parents kind of retreated from the world, pulled their kids out of school. So my sisters, they
Mm-hmm.
all attended school
Okay.
until certain grade levels, and my oldest sister, she was in school until she was like 12 or I think 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I relied on my older sister to teach me, because my parents, we were at
You
home, but we
did.
weren't being taught anything. We didn't have school books. We did when I was
Nothing.
very, very young. But by the time I would have been in like third grade, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
there were no textbooks. There was nothing to study. It was just stay indoors.
That's it.
Yes. So my sister Kate, who I was telling you about, she
Mm-hmm.
was my fourth sister. She is she is my one sister who kept her faith in God.
Mm.
And she's the one I told you that had passed away a year and a half ago. And
Yeah.
she was an angel to me, and they
Mm.
all were angels to me when I was young.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she taught me to read when I was about, I don't know, 7 years old
Mhm.
or something. We
Wow.
had the alphabet in our living room because if
Yeah.
someone visited from church, it looks like we're doing homeschool.
Okay.
And
So people at church like were under the assumption that you guys were doing homeschooling.
yes, they were.
Okay.
And there was a certain, I can't imagine that they didn't suspect that there were problems in our home, because we were very
Hmm.
strange, but and our
Yeah.
parents were very opinionated, but we
Okay.
we had an act that we played at church.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
But I want to tell you that my sister taught me to read, but I had inadvertently trying to learn on my own, memorized the
Mhm.
alphabet backwards, because it was across the
You
top of the living
did.
room, and I would come
Oh my
downstairs and
gosh.
I'd see the Z, and so I
Yeah.
was like ZYXWVUTSRQPONMLKJIHGFEDCBA,
Oh my goodness. Like you just spit that right out.
because
Whereas
that's the
most
way
of
I
us would
learned
be
it.
like, Z, Y, I don't know. Wow.
And Kate taught me to read,
Hmm.
and she was an avid reader. She would read any
Okay.
book she could get her hands on,
Oh.
and that was basically the extent of my schooling. So that kind of gives you a
That
rounded
is
picture of my childhood.
that's unbelievable. I mean, it is. It's almost unbelievable. Do you look back and it's like unbelievable? I mean, here one of my favorite people are underdogs. I just love underdogs. And in essence, you started out saying you've built successful companies, right? And you just said you did not go to school. So you got to fill us in a little bit. You
Yeah.
get to, let's say, that 18-year-old Calvin. What are you doing at that point?
At that point, I had a really great relationship with the bishop at church,
Hmm.
and um, I had decided, as is customary in the LDS church, that I was going to serve a mission. I was going to be a missionary and go out and
Hmm.
preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, around the world,
Yeah.
wherever they sent me, when I was
Yeah.
19 years old. And my parents, I knew that made them happy because that's what they wanted.
Hmm.
But I was very bold to say to my parents that I was doing it for me and not for them, especially
Wow.
when they would be concerned. Like my mom would say, you know, you didn't get home last night until very late. Where were you?
Hmm.
Were you sleeping with your girlfriend? Or whatever she would say, or whatever negative thing she thought I was doing.
Hmm.
And I would say, listen, I don't, and this is when she was under threat that I would leave and go live with my brother. I would say, I didn't do anything wrong, but
Hmm.
I'm going to go on a mission. I've already told you that, but I'm
Mhm.
going for me and not for you. And so, you know, it was kind of in your face, maybe
Yeah.
not my proudest moment,
Mhm.
um, but
Standing your ground, in
I was
essence.
standing my ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So at 19, I submitted all of my paperwork. It went to Salt Lake City, Utah. Then
Mm-hmm.
you wait and wait, and you get a letter back, and you open the letter, and it tells you where you're going.
Oh, so you have no
And
idea.
you don't know. You don't choose,
Okay.
actually.
Oh,
So I
wow.
open the letter, and I'm reading it, and it says that you've been called to serve in Curitiba. It's actually Curitiba, but I didn't know how to say it. Curitiba,
Yeah.
Brazil. And
Oh,
I
nice.
was so excited. And I remember that I said to my younger brother, I'm going to Africa.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, I
Oh,
didn't even know where Brazil was, you know.
right. Well, you
Um,
didn't learn geography.
no.
Right.
So
Africa.
you know, I can like this the story gets a little drawn out, so I'll condense it a little. But I
Yeah.
went to Provo, Utah, to the Missionary Training Center, and that's where you learn Portuguese and also what you're supposed to do as a missionary and stuff like that. And learning Portuguese is what taught me English. You know, I sit down in this class and they're talking about verbs and adverbs and, you know, nouns and and conjugating verbs and all of these and sentence structure and things and they're explaining all of this and I'm learning English and Portuguese at the same time.
Oh,
And
incredible.
so that was a great education for me. And I would say that was really the first kind of school-like experience I had ever had.
Wow.
I go to Brazil. I write in my book about some of the incredible experiences there where I just experienced how God loves everyone and how he doesn't love you based on which church you're going to. He
Mm-hmm.
loves you because you're his child. And there were so many wonderful experiences like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to realize that the question wasn't really whether God loved me, but whether I loved God. And
Wow.
so I get through my mission, get to the end, and all of my friends are my new friends, you know, from 2 years in Brazil are
Mm-hmm.
going off to college or all have these plans. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm going to do next. All I had ever planned to do in my life was to go on a mission. I didn't know what to do after that.
Sure.
So I came home and I studied to get my GED because my
Oh,
goal was I'm going to go to college like all of my friends. I think I can do it.
okay.
So at almost 20 years old, I got my GED. My father was not impressed. He said,
Oh,
"What do you need that piece of paper for? Do you need that so that someone can tell you you're smart?"
oh gosh.
And so I realized that I couldn't rely on them for that type of
Mm-hmm.
reassurance.
Right.
And
Right.
I then took the ACT exam, which is at the time was the more common versus the SAT, common college entrance exam. And
Mm-hmm.
I studied and studied for like 6 months. At night
Yeah.
after working, I would sit and read and try to learn. But it's very hard to catch up on 12 grades of learning in a few
Yeah.
months with no tutor. So
Wow.
I bombed the test and
Oh,
I was not accepted into any university. I didn't have test scores. I didn't have high school diploma. I didn't have anything.
okay.
And my brother in Las Vegas again shows up as a rescuer for me and
Yeah.
says, "Why don't you come down here?" His wife was a registered nurse. He'd been remarried at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and she was educated, and she took pity on me and wanted to really help me. And she's a wonderful person.
Mm.
And so I moved in with them in Las Vegas, and my parents were devastated that I was moving to Sin City.
Oh,
And
so, I mean, the worst of the worst places,
the
right?
worst. Yep.
Quote unquote.
The quote unquote. And here I found an incredible community.
Oh,
And I had my sister-in-law helped me. She took me to a store called Learning is Fun. It's a store for teachers.
yeah.
And my biggest struggle in the world was math. I just knew no math. I didn't know nothing about math.
Oh,
And she took me and I remember we would open the grade books and she would open them and say, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" No. She would go down a grade. "Do you know how to do this?" No. We went all the way
oh,
down to third grade.
yeah. Oh
And we bought third through 12th grade
my gosh.
books, and I would work on them. And she would come home after her 12-hour shift at the hospital and
Yeah.
help me with the things that I had not figured out.
Oh,
And
goodness.
um, yeah, and then she helped me also to get an appointment with a school counselor at the university in Las Vegas, UNLV,
Yeah.
and she coached me on what to do and say. And I went and met with that admissions counselor, and I
Mhm.
told her everything in a condensed
Yeah.
version. I
Yeah.
grew up on a farm. I
Mhm.
had no education. I was homeschooled, but I actually wasn't taught anything.
Mhm.
But I know I can learn because I learned to speak Portuguese. I'm fluent in Portuguese now.
Mhm.
Um, and I've done all this and this and this, but I don't have the test scores. And she looked at me and she said, you know we, what we're going to do is I'll
Mhm.
give you a chance. You can come as a non-admitted student. You'll be auditing classes. You'll get grades, but they don't count towards graduation unless you get admitted. And if you can get passing grades for 2 semesters, we will admit you into the university.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I wanted to hug her.
Yeah, of course.
And I began taking classes. I had to start. They did give me an entrance exam for math because I had no test scores from high
Mhm.
school, and I bombed that too, even though I did
Oh,
better than my ACT.
yeah.
And I had to start at math 95. So I did
Okay.
95A, then I did 96A, and then I was finally able to take 101.
Oh,
But I after 2 semesters had a perfect 4.0. Worked very hard for that,
wow.
and was admitted into the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Oh my gosh. And this was like this a straight up miracle. Let's
A
just
miracle.
capture that.
Yes.
And you look at the threads of these women that were in your life, Kate, your sister-in-law, this woman, counselor, admissions counselor at the college. Like
Mhm.
everybody was seeing the gold in you.
They really were.
They all
They
saw the
were,
gold in you and they came to support you and lift you up.
yes.
Wow.
They were there. They saved me in each
Hmm.
of their own ways.
Did they fully know this? Because I know sometimes people, just it's part of who they are to be to operate that way. But sometimes, it's like, do they actually know the fullness of their steps of obedience to help you along the way?
I wish I knew who the admissions counselor was. It
Yeah,
was,
you might want to
I
find her.
don't,
I'm just
I
saying.
don't know. I wonder if there's a way. That's a great
I
one.
bet you could. That would be
I'll bet I
so
could.
incredible. That's
She
your
has no
homework
idea
assignment.
what happened. That is my
I'm giving
homework
you a homework
assignment.
assignment. Like
My
to be
sister,
able to give that testimonial,
yes,
like on the
yes.
back end, because a lot of times, for example, for you or for me, like you might say hi to somebody at the grocery store and talk to them for a little bit, and you never know like what it does to shape, their next 20 years. If somebody is
Mm.
super depressed that day and keeps them from committing suicide, and this is just an extreme case, right? But to be able to hear the flip side of what you did for somebody, and yeah, I think that'd be incredible because I'm sure
I'm
it
going to see
changed
if I
the
can figure that out.
complete trajectory of your life, right? Tell us
Complete.
how this completely changed everything. Like, what did you decide to go to school for then?
I went for business and
Mm,
studied business administration.
okay.
Oh, I do want to close the loop on this. I want to tell you
Oh, yeah.
that I was with my sister on her deathbed,
Mm,
and she knows how grateful I am to her. And
yes.
and I also have had the chance multiple times to express to my sister-in-law Julie, who
Hmm.
has was since been divorced from my brother,
Hmm.
because he continues to have challenges. But I've
Yeah.
expressed to her many times
Yeah.
how grateful I am. But I appreciate you bringing out that counselor. I'm going to
Yeah.
work for that.
Yeah, I think it would just be absolutely incredible. You'll have to close the loop on that one with me too. I would love to hear.
Yeah.
I just
But
love hearing, testimonials. So if somebody were able to just know what became of Calvin, her step of obedience, I'm sure, maybe she went above and beyond what she was quote unquote supposed to do.
supposed to do.
Hmm.
She
Hmm.
gave me an opportunity that was closed off to a path that was closed off to me. She opened the door,
Yeah.
that
Like
gate.
that door was locked, right? In essence,
Yes,
she
it
gave you the
was.
keys. Amen.
And So, going to school, I went for those semesters. I got it admitted, and
Mm-hmm.
I went for one more semester. But it's hard to explain. Let me jump to the answer. The whole picture. I do graduate eventually, but it took me over 10 years to graduate because
Wow.
I was not accustomed to the structure of school. I had
Yeah.
never written a term paper. I had never taken an exam. I had never
Mm-hmm.
sat through a lecture other than, kind of, sort of, when I was learning Portuguese at the missionary training center, which doesn't really count, but it was kind of the experience of being in a classroom. I had never been in a classroom.
Wow.
You can imagine by the time someone gets to college, they have been very customized and conditioned and
Mm-hmm.
understand how the system works. It was
Right.
foreign to me, and it was difficult to sit in a
Mm.
room
Yeah.
and to take lecture and to write term papers and to take tests and
Right.
everything. I really struggled with the structure of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I ended up um, quitting school, quitting
Okay.
college,
Mm-hmm.
even though I had perfect grades.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I heard about these jobs that were open for to be a flight attendant for airlines, and I was like, that sounds incredible. I want to travel all
Yeah.
over the world.
Yeah.
So I ended up becoming a flight attendant for United Airlines,
Oh, cool.
and I moved to Chicago, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like in Chicago is like where I had my experience that most people would be like their high school experience. For me, it was in my mid 20s, but it was kind of that growing up,
Mm-hmm.
socializing, making friends from all different walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
and being a flight attendant in Chicago, flying all over the world and
Wow.
doing it was a really incredible experience. And
Mm-hmm.
then 9/11, the 2001, the terrorist attack of
Yeah.
9/11 occurred,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
was working that day, and
Mm.
I share the story of that in my book. But I was on a plane that day. I knew
Mm-hmm.
some of the people who died that day. Didn't know them
Oh,
well,
you
but
did.
they were fellow, uh, flight attendants that worked for my company, and two of them actually I had flown with a few weeks prior, and
Oh my
so it was a
gosh.
very tragic day
Yeah.
for everyone in
Yeah.
the whole country, the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was this wake up that the spirit had been working in me, telling me that I was supposed to go back to school, but I had been pushing it aside and pushing it aside and pushing it aside.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like a tragedy like that to shake you and say, don't put off any longer. And so I
Yeah.
returned to Las Vegas, and then I really returned in earnest with the goal of completing my degree,
Yeah.
which I then eventually did, and I graduated when I was 32. At that point, I had met the
Wow.
love of my life, my wife,
Oh.
at UNLV. We were married. She was
Oh
a
my gosh.
professor at UNLV,
Really?
so she was teaching, and I was a branch manager at that. By the time I graduated, I was a branch manager for Bank of America. So
Yeah.
I would have, my tellers and I would close up the bank, and my tellers would go to school, and I would go to school.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
actually had tellers that would go and take my wife's communications class because it was required for business majors, but I made
Mhm.
sure that I didn't take her class. I took someone else's.
Right. Of course. A little conflict of interest.
Yes,
Literally, right?
literally.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh my goodness. So not only did you get the keys to get into college, but you got the keys to meet your wife through college.
Yes,
Incredible. I mean, God is so good, right? He can literally
yes.
turn so many things around. And I mean, kind of just taking a moment, like thinking back to that 8-year-old, what did you think? Did you have any thoughts of what your life would look like? Or
When
even
I was
18,
when I
just
was
kind of
that age,
capturing that?
honestly, the most that my grandparents lived in Salt Lake City, Utah,
Hmm.
and the biggest dream I could have was to make it in a city like Salt Lake City, Utah, which is, by the way, quite a small city. It's a town
Oh, is it?
almost. I
Okay.
mean, it's a beautiful city. If you haven't been to
Mhm.
Salt Lake City, it's nestled in the mountains. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. But
Okay.
small city. Like the biggest dream I had was to live 3 hours away from where my parents were, and to somehow have enough money to live in that city, and to just be
Mhm.
normal. That was my biggest dream
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
have. And as I close out my book, and there's
Hmm.
so much more in there, of course, but as I close out my book,
Mm-hmm.
I have been successful in business, and
Mm-hmm.
for my 50th birthday, I visit my seventh continent. I visited all 50 states. I
Oh my
visited
God.
all seven continents. We travel all the way down to Antarctica,
Oh,
and
wow.
I write about hiking up to the top of this knoll in Antarctica, surrounded by penguins,
Mm-hmm.
ice, mountains,
Oh, wow.
icebergs, whales
Wow.
jumping out of the water. It's
Oh my
just this
goodness.
incredible experience. And I'm standing there and I'm just in awe
Mm-hmm.
of where my life has gone and how far God has taken me.
Yeah.
And that in my wildest imaginations, I never could
Mm-hmm.
have imagined something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And to be so far away from that boy hiding from the school bus in the dusty, at the foot of the mountains in Utah
Yeah.
to this place. And there's so much more. There's my faith journey and
Yes.
everything in there as well.
Yeah.
To, like I said, to realize that God is love,
Yeah.
um, and not anger and other things. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah,
Well, I
I
would love
can't.
if you would be willing just to share a little bit about, that faith journey as you got older, right? I know you said you didn't lose your faith, but did your faith shift and what did that look like? And then before you do that, would you just tell us the name of your book in case somebody's listening and they're like, I can't listen anymore, and for some reason they hop off. What's the name of your book? Because I want to make sure that people get your book.
Yes, it's hiding from the school bus.
Okay. And is that available everywhere?
It's available everywhere. It was yes, it's available on anywhere you'd purchase a book, either Audible
Okay.
or a published book, and it's an Amazon bestseller. And if you Google
Wonderful.
"hiding from the school bus," you will find either the book on Amazon or wherever you purchase books, or the book website, which also has additional content showing some of the pictures of my childhood and some other things.
Oh, I love that. Well, tell us a little about your faith journey beyond, let's just say you're into your 30s now. Like what did that look like for you? Or when did
You know,
that
the most
show?
the most important shift was this shift from fear to love. And,
Hmm.
you know, people think that the opposite of love is hate, but the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of love is fear.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and so this I grew up afraid. I grew up afraid of God, afraid of my
Hmm.
parents, afraid of so many, afraid of mistakes, afraid that I wasn't good enough or doing enough.
Hmm.
And part of the biggest shift was this experience that I had on my mission. And I think I don't think I could explain the shift without just telling you the story. I
Hmm.
was about a year on my mission in Brazil. You see the LDS missionaries, they're wearing white shirts if they're young men, or long dresses if they're young women, and they
Hmm.
wear a black name tag. And so I'm in Brazil,
Hmm.
and I was serving in a really poor area,
Hmm.
and we were walking down the street, and when I in this area there were dirt streets, and then on the sides of the road there are ditches that are the open sewers, and
Hmm.
people's homes would, they had, if they had running water, it was by gravity. They would put, well, there would be a pump, but it would pump the water up into the attic of their little home, and then the water would flush down to the toilet or the shower if they were fortunate to have one, and then it would
Hmm.
run out into the street, onto the edge of the street.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, in Brazil, these are called favelas, and people know a
Hmm.
lot about favelas, I think, because, the Christ the Redeemer statue is surrounded by favela in Rio de Janeiro, which is an example of
Hmm.
these great favelas. So I'm in this favela, and we're walking, and this woman comes running up to us, and she's basically, we're all, of course, speaking in Portuguese, and she's like, "Are you priests?" And I had this young American companion. He'd been in Brazil for like 3 or 4 weeks, so he could not hardly speak any Portuguese yet.
Okay.
But my Portuguese was very good, and I'm talking with this woman, and she's crying, and she's saying, "Please, your priest, come bless my son, bless my
Oh,
child. He's
yeah.
dying, and he's so sick that I can't take him to the health post." You know,
Hmm.
down there they have the post office and the health post and everything. These places that are run by the government, and they're too far away from the favela. She couldn't take him there, and so we rush in there. She lives in this little tiny one room
Yeah.
um, building that's built of bricks and just has a little metal roof over the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's smaller than the room I'm sitting in now.
Oh my
And there's a
gosh.
little bed in the corner, and her child is lying there. He's probably 10 or 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
just barely breathing. You could feel the weight of
Mm-hmm.
death nearby, is how I describe it. And he's just struggling for breath.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't, I mean, his color is past white. It's turning to like lack of oxygen, kind of
Oh my
purplish. And
gosh.
you just look at this boy thinking, this boy is going to die. And
Mm.
she's begging us to bless him. And so we placed our hands on his head and prayed.
Yeah.
And I felt in that moment that I should say that he was going to be healed.
Mm.
And I felt this rush of energy. I just felt
Mm-hmm.
that I felt that I was being inspired by God
Mm-hmm.
to bless him, to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And we spoke to the woman for a moment, and she went back to attending to him. I remember her like wiping his face as he was sweating and things like that. It's cold
Oh,
sweat.
yeah.
And we prayed and we left.
Okay.
Well, the next morning we got up and we said, let's go check on this woman and her child, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're walking into the favela, and there are some, as it always is in Brazil, there are some kids in the street playing soccer and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
having a good time. That's their sport, you know? And we get
Mm-hmm.
to the house of this woman, and she comes out and she's beaming. And we
Mm.
say, "How is your son doing?" And she said, "Why don't you ask him?" And she points out in the street, and he's playing soccer with these kids in the
Oh,
street.
oh my God.
And I turned to this woman, and we are just like, just like tears come in our eyes, and and she's
Mm.
crying, and she's happy, and she's smiling.
Oh.
And I said to her, I said, this is incredible. And I invited her to come to church, and she said, no, no, no. Um, that's okay. I have my religion. And in
Mm.
Brazil, they have this thing they always say, many people would say, I was born Catholic and I'm going to die Catholic. And
Oh,
she said,
okay.
that's what they always said. You know, I was soy católico. I'm
Okay.
Catholic. I was born
Yeah.
Catholic. I'm gonna die Catholic. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And she said, but when I prayed to God, He sent you.
Oh my
And
God.
I just had this experience cemented something so deeply in me that I shared
Mm.
with you earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that God loves His children,
Yes.
and He loves all of us.
Mm.
And
Amen.
I'm not saying that there aren't, things that we can do to please God and to return our love to God, because I
Mm-hmm.
believe that there are things that we can and should do to return our love to God and to show Him that we love Him back. But to question whether or not God loves us is
Mm-hmm.
futile. He loves everyone, and that was cemented in me, and it kind of ripped apart some of this, God is based in fear, and God is based in, you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it well enough, or you're not going far enough, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that was that my parents had ingrained in me. That was
Wow.
one of the moments that separated me from that.
So you not only did you get to be, kind of a conduit of healing, but you were even healed at that moment as well. Like
Isn't that kind of
it
how it
sounds like
works often?
love came rushing in, right? That's what I'm
Yes.
hearing. Just
Yeah.
that power, right? It reminded me of, the verse, 1 John 4:18. It's there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's so true. And especially, if you grow up in a family that is that's the the feeling. In essence, you're literally living in fear, and that is a prison. And then to be set free into having this love, to be able to bring that to anybody and everybody. What a shift.
And I wish I could say that it was a 180-degree turn, but there's been a lifetime of struggle
Hmm.
for me,
Yeah.
and of breaking down the negative belief systems about myself
Hmm.
and other
Yeah.
things. And I've
Yeah.
had professional help as well. I have a wonderful therapist that has helped
Hmm.
me deal with a lot of the trauma of my childhood and understand why I do things that even sometimes I don't understand, which I
Hmm.
now can appreciate what a trigger is.
Hmm.
But that was one of the key moments that began to
Hmm.
shift my direction.
Yes. And thank you, for being open and vulnerable about that because I think sometimes people maybe don't even know that they need help. And a lot of times are just maybe even afraid. There's fear in sharing what they've walked through in their own story, kind of in fear of just kind of bringing up what happened in the past, right?
Often you feel that you aren't enough, or that you will be viewed differently. And what I have found is that in opening myself up,
Hmm.
and exposing my trials, my struggles, and my heart to the world,
Hmm.
is that there has been a rush come in of love and of support. And
Hmm.
some of that love that oftentimes throughout my life I lacked for myself
Sure.
has also found its way into my heart.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh. Well, so you went from not being able to write term papers and, you know, knowing the alphabet, backwards to frontward, and then you wrote a book. So tell us about like that prompting. Did the Lord like lead you to do this at one point? I know you said you really felt prompted in your 50, birthday, your Jubilee, year of Jubilee.
Yes.
What did that look like for you to step into that place to bring, the truth and light into what you walk through?
That was also a long journey. I had thought about writing a book many times,
Hmm.
as I had, uh, like when I graduated. And you know, I hadn't really thought about this till you asked the question, but I had a professor of English
Hmm.
who we had a creative writing essay, and that's where I wrote the first time I wrote a story about hiding from the school bus was for a professor in college. The second time when I was, in college. And she said at that time, you have to write a book. And
Oh my
so she
God.
planted that seed in me that someday I needed to write a book. And then
Yeah.
she also, by the way, for the rest of the semester, every time we had a creative we had different writing assignments. We had a creative
Yeah.
writing assignment. That's when I wrote my first one about hiding from the school bus. And it's the first time I
Yeah.
came up with the title. So this is, 20 years, more than 20 years ago.
Wow.
Or yeah, more than 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
then we had the next one, which was like business writing. And then
Mhm.
we had one that was persuasive writing. And she said,
Mhm.
I don't want you to do any of that.
I
I
don't
want you to
want you
write
to
me
do any
another
of that.
story. I want you to write me another story.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And do you remember her name?
I don't off the top of my head, but I still have the essay. And so I have it on there. And you know what? I haven't spoken to
Okay.
her either.
You have two homework assignments.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Wow. And oh my God,
For
how
all the people that have
amazing would it
asked me
be?
about why I wrote a book, you're the first person that I have actually realized or remembered
Mhm.
that college professor. So I have two assignments.
This is what happens.
Yeah. Well, it does.
Wow.
I
How
can
cool
tell
would
that
it
I can
be?
tell. I just want to say that I can tell that you are led by the Spirit.
Oh,
Like you,
absolutely.
because there's a different feeling and conversation that we're having here that I'm really, really enjoying and appreciating that you
Oh,
are bringing something to me, not just me sharing
yeah.
stories for an
Yeah.
audience.
Absolutely. This is, it's one of my greatest joys, and it was a journey to get here. So,
Mm.
I was just going to say, how cool would it be to wrap up one of your books and send that book to her? I mean,
I
oh my
Yes,
gosh.
I will
There's a
definitely do that.
movie that I'm being reminded of. Gosh, I'm not gonna, I can't remember the name of it right at this very moment, but there was a young boy from Mexico. Maybe you've watched the movie before, and if I can remember it in a moment, I'll tell you. But young boy from Mexico, grew up. His dad, I think he did like garlic farming. I can't remember exactly, but the odds were kind of against him. And a teacher I think he might have been a first grader, but he had this dream of becoming an astronaut. And she was the one who like fueled the dream. And everybody thought he was crazy. And he just kept trying to get into NASA. And I don't want to give everything away, but there was this moment to go back to the one who helped fuel the dream. And I just love those moments. I just
Mm,
and I'm just being reminded of that movie right now. It was so good. And I feel like this could even be a movie. Like, I
mm.
don't even know. So anyways, I'm just gonna stop right there. But gosh, this has been so incredible. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your journey with those who are listening in today?
I would just share that God is the ultimate lemons to lemonade guy.
Mm. Hmm.
And whatever lemons have you've been given in your life, he
Mm.
can turn them into something beautiful. I look at the culmination of all of my story and I reach
Hmm.
the end, as I shared with you, standing on, the top of this hill in Antarctica,
Hmm.
just pinching myself, saying, "How on earth did I get here?" And I
Yeah.
realized that I would not go back and change anything, whether it
Mm.
was abuse, neglect,
Mm.
all the things, the negative, quote unquote, negative
Hmm.
experiences that occurred in my childhood and throughout my life that have been trials and struggles and have brought pain and have left me with scars.
Yeah, absolutely.
They make me who I am. And if I were to go back and change anything, which, a lot of my life, I'd wished for certain changes, or wished I had been this, or wished I had had parents like that, or whatever it was.
Mhm.
Um, Now it's just gratitude because
Mm.
I couldn't be here if I
Yeah.
didn't go through all of those different things. And then there's more that will happen in my life, as
Hmm.
with all of us.
Yeah.
And understanding now that the great eternal struggle between good and evil, and God and Satan, or whatever you want to, however you want to define it,
Hmm.
um, whatever bad thing happens to you, God can turn it into something good, and He can
Yes.
he and even if it doesn't, not everyone is going to end up on a hilltop in Antarctica, and so I
Right.
don't want to say that that's what success was,
Right.
because success for me is just reaching a point where I can embrace what brought me here and the trials and struggles and be happy. And as I shared
Mm.
before, men are that they might have joy, and we spend a lot of time wishing for happiness in the future and
Hmm.
saying things like, I want to be happy in heaven, but
Hmm.
God never said that's when happiness is supposed to happen. And we can be he
Yes.
can bring us happiness and fulfillment and joy today. And I am grateful that is the great lesson of my life that I've learned.
It's so good. And when you said that, I was reminded of a passage that I was really leaning into last year when I had some just, you get kind of slammed with trials all at once. The Lord was
Mhm.
showing me to sit on this verse and really lean into it and learn from it. It was James 1, 2 through 3. Actually, it could go 2 through 4. It's counted all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. I mean, count it all joy in the
Mm,
trials. That's
mhm.
what's probably one of the most challenging things in this walk,
Hands
would you
down.
say?
I agree. Because in the
And
moment, you don't want to say thank you. I'm
right,
recovering from ACL surgery.
right, yeah,
And I'm not saying thank you that my knee
yes,
blew out,
right.
but you know what? I have found though that love heals. And
Hmm.
I was sitting a few days after surgery, and
Hmm.
I was just kind of touching my knee and saying, you know
Hmm.
what? I love you. You've been through
Oh,
a lot. It's going to be
yeah,
okay. And I
yeah.
feel like it has responded. And I can be a little, some would say a little, that might seem a little kooky to people, but try it
I
for
don't think
yourself.
so.
For
I don't think so.
the things that you struggle with in your life, whether it's a physical ailment or whatever, an expression of love can go a long way.
That's so good. I have to say, it was really interesting the other night. When I was growing up, I hated my nose. I was little and I wanted nose surgery because my nose didn't look like everybody else on TV. So I hated
Mm,
my nose. I would look in the mirror and just like hate on my nose. And I felt like the
mm,
Lord was just like, you need to apologize to your nose. So I was like praying over my nose the other night, like, I'm sorry for the way I talked to you. And 48 years old. So,
Good for you.
it's kind of, I like to call it flip the script. We need
Hmm.
to flip the words that we use, not only to speak over others, but over ourselves too, right? They say,
And that
love
can
your
be the
neighbor
hardest.
as yourself. Well, you got to love
There's an
yourself
implicit
before you can love
commandment
your
to love
neighbor,
yourself. That's right. That
right?
is the great missed commandment, is that you should also love yourself, not in the vain
Mm-hmm.
way that some people may take that.
Mm-hmm.
No, anyone who needs to hear that won't take it that way. You need to
Mm-hmm.
love yourself, and the key to loving others sometimes is to love yourself. And
Yeah.
when I lack in love for myself,
Mm-hmm.
appreciation for myself, then I often lack in my love of others.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? Wow. Well, Calvin, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. Before I do one more thing, I would love for you to just share the best way people can get in touch with you, because I'm sure that there might be folks who want to reach out to you, whether it's through your website or what have you. If you could just let us know about that.
Yes, absolutely. You can go to hidingfromtheschoolbus.com to read more about my stories and learn more about me. And then I do also have a personal website, calvinbagley.com.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you already lean into one of the things I was going to have you do is to speak a word of encouragement. And you definitely did that I always like to say, I do this for the one. So, if you could just kind of get in mind the one who's listening in today, would you just be open to praying over this one?
Yes, absolutely. I would
Thank
love to
you.
do that. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for the conversation we just had. We feel so touched by the Spirit on what's occurred
Mhm.
here, that we have felt love and connection. And we hope that the one who is listening right now, that that one is being touched as well, the one that needs to be found, the one that has maybe strayed from the 99, or maybe just felt separated from the 99, or
Mhm.
the one that is feeling weak, or that is feeling alone, that is feeling abandoned or hurt or cast off. That one needs love and needs to know that everything can work out. But in the dark night of the soul, the time when you feel so alone, it's hard to see that.
Mhm.
And so we pray that that one has felt inspiration today from the words that have been shared and from the journey of others,
Mhm.
to hold on for one more day, one more moment, one more
Mhm.
conversation, one more piece of inspiration, to know that there will be light and that
Mhm.
love will come in. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. This has been amazing, Calvin. Thank you so much. I am going to close with the Hope Unlocked anchoring verse. It's May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. And that's Romans 15:13. So thank you for being a brave voice who's setting others free. And the movie I mentioned, A Million Miles Away. So go check it out, everybody. I will be back with another episode next week. Thanks, listeners.